This is Hack and Hustle. We explore the ups, downs, and lessons learned in the world of cybersecurity, sales, and marketing, with a deep dive on a new topic each week. I'm Anthony Johnson.
And I'm Brad Rager, and this week we'll be talking about sales enablement. Help me help you sell better.
Joining us today, we got Brian Murphy. He just always goes by Murphy. I'm not sure if there's always, because there's a lot of Brians there, but I call him Murphy. But Brian's the SVP of Sales and Business Dev at NowSecure, mobile security testing platform. Brian's also a founding member of something called the Sales Enablement Society from back in the day, and he's just somebody I love to pieces. So, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
One of the things I mentioned just before we started, right, is these you with your experience in sales, just kind of being in the business world, like it's just so rich. But you didn't start in cyber sales or tech sales, really. Like, tell us a little bit about that. How did you get into this game?
Yes, it's a long story, so I can't give you the full version of it. But never in a million years did I think I was going to be in sales. I studied electrical engineering and biochemistry. I worked with the man who invented the MRI scanner. I had my own consulting business, traveling around the world, fixing medical equipment, setting up diagnostic centers. And when I stopped doing that, one of my buddies pulled me into software, and I was a developer for a while. And it was pretty interesting. I was a developer, and then my now wife was my girlfriend at the time. I think she didn't like the car I was driving and thought I should improve my profession and make more money. And she said I should be a sales engineer, and I had no idea what that was. And I went to work at a company as a sales engineer, and the sales rep quickly quit. And I ended up closing a bunch of deals, and people said I was the number one rep. And
so that's how you became sales then.
That's how I became sales. And then someone told me, whatever you do, one of my really good friends, a guy named Gary Kamika, I hope he listens to this. He's up on Long Island, and he said, whatever you do, don't let them pull you into sales management. And he went away on vacation. He came back and he said, what happened? And I ended up being a sales manager at BEA Systems. I was a director for the Southeast. And so that began my career as a sales manager, managing sales teams. And so that's kind of my journey. And the thing that I would always say, and I'm not sure you were going to ask another question because you probably want to, but what I found is that for me, I really love sales and I think it's misnamed. And this is the corny part. It should be called solves, because great salespeople are solving problems, and they work from the customer backwards, not from your product, your capability out to them. But I don't know if you like hearing that with your former marketing background.
No. That's good. That's how you do it right. I was going to make a joke about going to the dark side, but I think you just convinced me that you went to the right side, not the dark side.
It's funny. It reminds me when I met my wife, I was a consultant and I worked from home, and she didn't actually think I had a job, right? She's like, so where do the professionals hang out? I'm like, what? Right? She's like, you need a real job. And I'm like, I have a real job. Like, consultants, I guess what you can just agree or disagree whether it's a real job or not, right?
Right.
So, Brian, you've been in the sales game for a really long time, right? What's different from when you started versus today? Like, how's it different for sellers today versus back, when you're selling sticks?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you point out, I've been selling for a long time, and I did things before that. So yes, I'm old. But a lot of things have changed, and things have changed quite rapidly. Back when I really got started selling, there was tremendous value in being able to uncover and discover an organization, like who are the people and who did you have to get to. Now you can go buy a service for that, right? That's making that easy, much easier for you. Back then, you had your own sales system, right? You had a spreadsheet and you were tracking it. Now you go and buy a system for that. There's so many things that have happened. And I think back then the sellers were really the best sellers were the people that knew their products inside and out, and they could, bring that value. You don't need that anymore. People can go up online. They go ask their friends. There are lots of different ways for them to get all that information. So a lot of the things that when I first started selling, like I had something called a Palm Pilot, and I was an innovator because I figured how to connect my Palm Pilot to my computer and move contact information. And they had this thing called Maps, and I didn't have to print out a piece of paper. I could use it on my Palm Pilot. And then a BlackBerry came out.
Yeah. I was pretty excited to upgrade to the Trio from the Palm Pilot.
And then there was this thing called a BlackBerry. Like, oh my gosh, most kids or people I'm talking to today, like, what's a BlackBerry? A piece of fruit? Yeah, like an Apple. It's like an Apple device. There was a BlackBerry device. But all of this technology that has developed to make the job easier. What's interesting, and maybe I'm leading my own question, is that there's a bunch of technologies that are going to the people that buy things to make their job easier, but yet it's still a really hard, it's a really difficult challenge to do the proper matchmaking of the folks with the solutions and the people that need them. There's so much more information today than there ever was back then, but it's overwhelming because not all of the information is useful. And it doesn't necessarily make the job of deciding the best pathway and what's going to be best about that. A couple of things that I believe haven't changed, and I sure hope they don't, is that if you're a seller, a foundational best practice is start with curiosity. Be curious about the people you're working with. I don't know if we figured out a way to automate that yet. I'm sure we will. But that authentic interest and being driven by making somebody else successful. That's why I love sales, is that my victory dance, my victory image isn't I received a great big paycheck or lots of stock options. My victory dance comes when one of the people that I sold to or my team sold to is standing on stage in front of 1,000 people to say, thank you for the Employee of the Year award, CEO, and I couldn't have done it without my mom and my dad. Thank you, and my peers. But man, without that NowSecure company, there's no way I could have gotten there. And especially Joe Jablonski. You're awesome, Joe. Thank you.
That's awesome.
So that hasn't changed, I believe, and that's at least what I've seen.
With all of that automation, Brian, and all the efficiency, I mean, what I often think about is, I think that is helpful at an individual level. I wonder if it collectively just raises the bar, adds to the noise, and you still have to be great at your craft to be able to rise above it, because what used to be special now becomes table stakes. And so how do you stand out in that world where that bar is continuing to go up and attention is just ever more scarce? Do you see that too? Am I thinking about that the right way?
I think so, absolutely. I've been using the last couple of days the analogy of golf, and I'm not a golfer, but I play golf, so you will know what I mean if you ever get out on the course with me. But if you think about the golf clubs, I can go out and play golf, and it's a very simple game, generally speaking. It's you put this little white ball on this tee, and you have to just knock it down the nice grass and get in this little hole, and no one's trying to hit you, no one's yelling bad things at you. So it's a simple game, but really, really difficult to play. And I have my golf clubs, right? And say that's my technology. My golfing, if you give me a set of pings or whatever the best, new, greatest golf clubs, I don't know if I'm going to be playing that much better golf. Yeah. It's still the craft. And so absolutely 100%. All of this automation sort of levels the field at some level. It's how, as an individual or as a sales leader, are you going to get people to rise above all of that technology and really stand out? And that's where I fall back on a couple of points I just made, is that do I have salespeople that are really in it, that customer journey about helping their customer be the hero? I think too many salespeople end up thinking they're the hero. When you say, hey, give us the customer success story, they talk about all the things they did, about all the great moves they made, about the great negotiation, about this, that. Are you able to help somebody get to an outcome that they want and tell that story? And then tell the story about how you help guide them to that. What other resources you brought to bear? What other insights you shared with them? That's where I think it really is. And yes, I think that still differentiates, because I think a lot of people that are in this profession are able to get a job done and they're able to sell things, but are they building customers? And today's customers are repeating that.
I go so far as to even say that I'm curious if you agree with this, right? Like, if you have a seller who shoehorns or shoves the wrong solution to a buyer, right? They force them to buy, somehow force, right? That's actually worse, because what you have is you have a customer who's, one, not getting the value, their word of mouth, their network. They're like, yeah, but it didn't, and they don't understand the nuances. But when you have that on the other side, right? If you can solve even just the one meaningful thing for them, like, they are singing the praises, right? And so, like, I think it's sometimes you have some people are like really, really good salespeople, and you're like, man, they could sell ice to people in Alaska, right? And like, that's kind of dangerous when in a technology company, right? Would you agree with that? Disagree?
I definitely disagree with it. What I would say that to me, that the worst compliment you can ever give a salesperson is you could sell ice to somebody in Alaska.
Okay, good.
Because to me, that's back to my philosophy of you should be solving a problem. Now, maybe there is an instance where that person in Alaska really needs a lot of ice for whatever reason, but you really, if you want to be in the profession for the long haul, if you're trying to do good things, it's all about helping somebody. They'll never remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel, right? That's a common. And so whatever I did to get you to, whatever I sold you, and I often have this conversation. Think about the last time you were sold something, or the best experience you ever had where you were sold, versus the best buying experience you had.
Yeah, that's a really, really great call.
Being sold means somebody took it, like if you use that phrase, like, that person sold me, that means you didn't own it. It was someone else did something to you. When you buy something, you own that. That's yours. I did that. And I think that's the problem. Those people that push something on somebody, it could work out, right? You push on your kid, eat your broccoli, and they get tall and strong, and they get a scholarship, and they end up on Wheaties, a box of Wheaties. But that doesn't always happen. It's about the intention, and I think that's super important.
So I'm curious, Brian, the Sales Enablement Society. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, that was so much fun. That we got that kicked up back in 2016, and I was lucky enough, a gentleman named Scott Santucci and Brian Lambert. Scott and Brian had both been over at Forrester, and they did a bunch of research on sales, and it was a really interesting time for me. I was just we just sold a company, and I was sort of doing some independent consulting, and I got connected with Scott, and it was really, really aligned with a lot of the things that I thought about. I was lucky enough to be an athlete in college. I got to play football in college. And I always thought one of the best things about sales is that it's an athletic endeavor. You get knocked down, you have to get back up, you can train. There's all these different things that a lot of parallels. And when Scott started talking about it, he really started talking about this concept of team. And I thought, yeah, that's the way I think about sales, is really more of a team. And we talk about, there's sales and there's marketing. A lot of times they weren't getting together, but then there's product and there's everybody getting together, and it's a team sport. And so the idea was that sales enablement wasn't just about training somebody, but it was about how do you do selling more effectively. And we talk about it all the time, is that it's a cliche that any company, we're all in sales. Right? I think you hear that. Well, I live in the startup world, so maybe in big companies they don't say that, but it's always like we're all in sales. And what does that really mean? What does that really mean? An organization exists to be in service of a customer. If you don't serve a customer, there's no reason for your existence as a commercial entity. And so the idea is, how do you arrange all those different what were former silos to come together to be in service of the customer and not in their own self-serving silo? And so the idea of the Sales Enablement Society is go beyond this idea that, how do we help a salesperson do a better pitch? It's like, how do we help the organization do a better pitch? Instead of how do we do better marketing for marketing's sake to get more downloads or form fills, to how do we have a better message that aligns with what we really do to help the customer recognize their need and that there are solutions out there. And so that's really kind of the Magna Carta of the Sales Enablement Society, which has since been renamed Revenue Enablement because of the idea that it's not just that sales has a certain connotation. And it's really about consistent revenue production, which is all about continuously serving the customer, not just the one time. So that was a super awesome experience. And it was such an incredible time because it went from 16 people out in the Leesburg area to, thousands of people in super couple of years. It was crazy.
So I just want to jump in really quickly here, right? Like building that, seeing those people, the people you worked with, right? I'm going to kind of steal your thunder, Brad, here. Like when you think about great sellers, right? Like what's nurture versus nature? What can be taught? What just comes natural? And to take someone or make them to actually be a great seller, right? Is it the empathy of actually listening to the customer? Is it the articulate? Like, what is it?
So in the world, according to Murphy, I'd say Ted Lasso.
I love that.
My favorite scene in Ted Lasso is "Be curious, not judgmental." And when he, if you know
the dart scene.
Oh. Yeah, the dart scene. Like it's my best, and it's just like that victory over the dark force and just saying that, hey, everybody judges me, and I've been judged my whole life, but I'm always just curious. I want to ask a question, and I think this is like such a key aspect of successful longevity sellers and sales and marketing is that curiosity. How do I make it better? How do I improve it? How do I improve myself? How do I improve the people around me? All of those things. The greatest sellers they're like great athletes. The great athletes make everybody around them play better. And great salespeople do the same thing. They're bringing back feedback to the marketing team. They're bringing back feedback. They're creating customer conversations with the product team. They're giving that engineer that little bit of a compliment. Let me tell you a story about how someone's using your product, and the engineers, just fly off the handle. If you had time for a longer story, I did that when I was early in my career. I flew to the West Coast. I was working for WebLogic, and I asked the head of engineering if I could talk at his meeting, and he said, "Why?" I said, "I just want to tell some stories about how people are using this technology." And I had a friend who was starting a catering business. I had all the food. There was going to be 20 people, and 2 people showed up. So I flew all the way to California for that. I told my stories anyway, and I said, eat, take it home, whatever. And I left. I got back the next day, and I got a call from the head of engineering. The head of engineering said, "Oh, man, I'm so sorry. We had an emergency. I'm sorry we missed the meeting." I'm like, okay. He goes, "Well, can you come back?" The 2 guys that were there said it was the most amazing thing to hear about what customers were really doing. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I could do that." He goes, I said, "But I'm in the middle of, I'm a seller. I have to go do my work." And he said, "Yeah, but I need you to come back." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll come back." And he's like, "Can you come back tomorrow?" I said, "What? I just was out. I live in Virginia. You live in San Francisco." And he's like, yeah. He goes, "I'll pay it. I'll work with your boss and all that." And that's when I knew I was onto something. And then what was amazing is that as a seller, I would go to San Francisco for regular meetings, and every engineer would say, "Hey, Brian. Hey, Murph. Hey, what's going on?" And I would be walking with people that worked out of that office, and they would say, "How do you know that guy? He was the release manager. Why do you why do you know the release manager? I said, oh, I use the release manager to know whether I should demonstrate the new version or the old version or what, Well, why is he talking to you? Because I let him talk to my customers. Anthony, you introduced me to a great technology, Avoma, which I love Avoma because in the new world of selling in this kind of format,
Yeah.
Avoma allows me as a sales leader, not just to help the sellers, like what they're saying and how they're doing it, but I can bring a day in the life. I can bring a meeting to my product management team, to my executive team, to my board members, to other customers. Like there's so much I can do that people just want to know, like people are curious too. What's going on? How does it work?
I love your message about connecting that messaging through the organization. I can't tell you how many conversations I have with CISOs where, I think the good ones understand that a big part of their job is selling, and the ones that struggle, they don't realize that. But a huge part of like security program effectiveness, it's in the hands of people that are not in the security program, and you have to bring those folks along. So when you think about enabling sales teams and training sales teams and helping them be effective, have you seen companies or programs that really do this well and bring that voice of customer and that curiosity through an organization and connect all those dots internally?
Yeah. Well, I would shout out, Scott Santucci has a company, has a practice. They've done, I think, a really good job. They talk about value creation, and Scott's title now is a value creation architect and founder. So like this concept of value creation and really being focused as a selling organization, how do I create value for my customers? I've used others back in the day, corporate visions, and it was all about stop talking about what you do, start talking about the outcomes that you can help create. And that was like sort of a big shift. I think a lot of organizations want to tell you all about, hey, I built this product, it does that thing. And it's the empathy, it's the curiosity of what are they doing? And then it's saying, okay, if you want to get this outcome, here are some things that we've learned because we talk to a lot of people that are trying to solve this problem. And using that approach, and there are organizations that train people on how to think that way. My own experience has been that sales methodologies are like diets, and they all work until they don't. And diets don't work because you ate 40 peas and chewed them 37 times, or you only eat red food or blue food or whatever. The diets work because, we have an internal operating system. It's biochemistry. It's physiology. It's if you take a lot of calories in, can you consume 5,000 calories and still lose weight? Yeah, go talk to Michael Phelps. I think he had a 12,000 calorie requirement each day. Otherwise, he'd lose weight. Sales methodology is the same way. I think underlying all of it, when you strip it all away, whatever methodology you want to look at, it does boil down to these core things. It's human to sell. Daniel Pink, right? It's human to sell. We wouldn't be a society without everybody knowing how to sell a little bit. Your 2-year-old, well, Anthony, maybe your newborn isn't quite selling yet, but they know how to cry to get you motivated to do something.
Oh, I think right. She's working on it already, right? You're spot on. I will say one thing I learned about Phelps real quick, and the year he won the Olympics, that was the year that Speedo and NASA collaborated on this new swimsuit that increased buoyancy and like super streamlined, and then the Olympics banned it after they banned that swimsuit. So I think technology intersected with that process practice. Like there's something there.
Well, it is that's one of my other core tenets. A guy named Franz Johansson wrote a book called The Medici Effect, and he talked about great innovations happen at the intersection of expertise. And when you think about so many organizations, this is getting back to sort of revenue enablement or sales enablement. So many organizations, they don't really think about it that way. You've got your marketing function, you have your sales function, you have your product function. You want those perspectives as a seller. I want all those perspectives when I'm out trying to solve a problem for a customer, because it's the intersection when you actually hear a customer requirement, what the outcome they're really trying to achieve, and you bring all these different experts together. inside an organization, or you bring, Brad, you work obviously at Optiv, right? Bringing in all of these different perspectives from different organizations to come up with a really compelling solution. NASA and Speedo, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Right? There's so many examples of that. So anyway.
100%. Awesome. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap. Let's do the roundup. Anthony, what's your top takeaway from our discussion?
One, I think that we could probably be on this and do this for like 3 hours. And just like I said, Murphy's got amazing stories and background. I think that the top takeaway for me is the importance of actually empathy, right? I'm guilty of it. Like we built something that we think is cool. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, let me show you this thing and then this thing and this thing, right? But this is actually giving me a little bit more pause of like, yeah, maybe I should shift how I kind of think about that, right? And talk about what I'm actually solving for them more deliberately, being more empathetic. So that's my takeaway. Brad, what about you?
Yeah, I think one of the things you said, Murphy, that stuck with me is about these programs being like diets. You know, they tend to fade away, but I think there's value in diets that goes beyond just the weight that you lose immediately. And it's in teaching you new habits and training you and setting the foundation. So if you build on those habits, you then have a framework that helps you adjust your behavior and make it regular and normal. So you don't have to, stick to a medic, check the boxes exercise, something like that that's really hard to do. It just becomes part of the way that you work to make you effective. And to me, that's the way you can start to take something that somebody may not be innately gifted with and make them better. They may not be a naturally super curious person, but if they learn to listen enough, then they might start to listen more instinctively. And I think that can be incredibly valuable. What's your takeaway? What would you summarize from the conversation?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I did most of the talking, so that's generally a bad rule for people in sales. You should do a lot more listening.
Okay, now how about a piece of advice?
Yeah, we'll take a piece of
Listen more,
advice.
talk less. Okay. Well, I would just say my takeaway is that it's fun for me. I'm passionate about this. What I love about, I talked about moving into sales management. What I love about that, and what I think you both are about, is there's something awesome about coaching. And I've been a coach, ironically, for soccer for about 20 years. And I guess I have to bring up Ted Lasso. I had a professional trainer and professional coach give me the ball for the year for soccer. And he said to me in front of a large group, he said, you don't really know much about soccer, but you're the best coach I've ever worked with, and I've learned so much from you. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And there's something in that. And it's the idea of how do I bring out the best in people, whether I'm coaching a sales rep on my team or am I really thinking about I could be in a coaching relationship with my customer? Can I be in a coaching relationship and make it bidirectional? Anthony and I have this great relationship where I think sometimes I'm the coach and sometimes he's coaching me. It's super cool and it's super fun. And at the end of the day, the big takeaway is we're all just people. We all just want to get along and we all want to make something better. And if we can tap into that, the job of marketing, of sales, of product development, of executive management, all of that, it's all serving this purpose. We're all people. We're trying to get from where we are to some other place. How do we make that happen?
I love that. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's a blast to chat with you, man. Like, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was super fun. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Anthony.
As always, Hack and Hustle is brought to you by Crux, the talent marketplace for cybersecurity, and Delve Risk, the intelligence platform for cybersecurity sales and marketing. If you have questions you'd like us to answer or topics you'd like us to cover, drop us a line at pod@crux.so.